The ICU lights flickered as the heart monitor flattened into a single merciless line. A senior doctor stepped back and spoke with quiet certainty. Time of death. Taiwo Akinyemi, one of Nigeria's most powerful CEOs, was gone. Behind the glass, executives exchanged looks that mixed grief with calculation. His sister, Funke Akinyemi, exhaled slowly. Somewhere in the corridor, paperwork was already being prepared. Power was about to change hands. Then the doors burst open. A pregnant poor maid, her uniform soaked with rain and sweat, pushed past security. Her name was Hauwa Sadiq. In her trembling hand was a small bundle of crushed green herbs wrapped in old cloth. "Please," she whispered, stepping toward the bed. "Let me try," doctors shouted. Guards rushed forward, but the moment the herb touched Taiwo's lips, the monitor beeped. "Before we continue, what country are you watching from and what's your local time right now? Share it in the comments. And if you're drawn to stories of justice, kindness, and hope, don't forget to subscribe." Hauwa Sadiq woke before dawn, as she did every day long before. The city of Lagos stretched and remembered itself. The room she rented was no more than a concrete box wedged behind a mechanic's workshop in Mushin. The walls were stained with years of damp heat. The thin mattress on the floor pressed painfully against her back, and when she shifted, a slow ache spread through her lower belly. She placed one hand there instinctively. The baby moved, a faint reminder that she was not alone, even when the world treated her as if she were. Outside, generators coughed to life, and the smell of petrol mixed with frying akara from a nearby stall. Hauwa sat up carefully, tying her headscarf in silence. There was no mirror, but she already knew what she would see. A tired young woman, eyes older than her 26 years body, heavier, now marked by whispers she could never outrun. Pregnant and unmarried, the landlord had said 2 weeks earlier, standing at her door with crossed arms. "This place is not for disgrace." He had given her 1 month. That morning, she dressed in her faded hospital cleaning uniform, the fabric stretched tighter than it used to be. She hesitated before buttoning it, worried someone would notice the change more clearly today. They always did eventually. The walk to the private hospital took nearly an hour. Hauwa saved transport fare whenever she could, especially now. Every naira mattered. As she walked, she passed billboards showing smiling families and luxury cars, worlds she moved through like a ghost. At the hospital gate, security barely looked at her. She was invisible here. That had always been the rule. Inside, the building gleamed with polished floors and quiet authority. Hauwa collected her mop and bucket and began her shift the way she always did, silently, methodically, careful not to draw attention. She cleaned corridors, restrooms, waiting areas, places where anxiety clung to the air like perfume. It was during her second round that she found herself near the ICU. She told herself she had no reason to stop there, yet her feet slowed every time. Behind the thick glass machines surrounded the man in the bed, like watchful sentinels. Tubes ran from his arms, his chest rising and falling in shallow rhythm. His face, though pale, carried a gravity that felt familiar to Hauwa in a way she couldn't explain. Taiwo Akinyemi. She had learned his name from whispers. Nurses spoke it with respect. Doctors lowered their voices when they passed his door. Even cleaners knew better than to linger. Hauwa did linger, not openly, just enough to look. Something about him unsettled her. Not because he was rich or powerful, those things meant little to her, but because each time she saw his face, a strange pressure formed behind her eyes. A memory hovered just out of reach, like a word on the tip of her tongue. Once, as she wiped the glass, her reflection overlapped with his still form. For a brief second, she felt dizzy, as though time had folded in on itself. She stepped back, steadying herself. "Don't get attached," she whispered under her breath. "He doesn't even know you exist." Later that morning, she was scrubbing a spill near the nurse's station. when two orderlies walked past, talking freely. "They say the CEO may not make it through the night," one said. "The board is already restless," the other replied. "Kunle Ogunle has been here twice today." Hauwa's grip tightened on the mop handle. She pretended not to hear, but every word lodged inside her. By midday, the weight in her body grew heavier. Standing for too long made her legs ache. When she bent to lift the bucket, a sharp pain shot through her back and she gasped softly. That was when the supervisor noticed. "Hey!" The woman's snapped eyes narrowing. "What's wrong with you?" Hauwa straightened too quickly. "Nothing, Ma." The supervisor's gaze dropped lingering on her stomach. Her expression changed, not with concern but calculation. "You're pregnant," she said flatly. The corridor felt suddenly too bright, too quiet. "Yes," Ma, Hauwa answered. There was no point denying it anymore. "How long?" "Almost 6 months." The woman clicked her tongue. "You should have said something." Hauwa lowered her eyes. "I was afraid." "And you should be the supervisor," replied. "You know hospital policy. Temporary staff are expected to be presentable. We don't need distractions." Hauwa felt heat rise to her face. "I can still work. I don't complain. I clean everything." "That's not the point," the woman cut in. "People talk. Patients' families talk." She glanced around before lowering her voice. "I'll report this. Management will decide." The rest of the day passed in fragments. Hauwa cleaned without seeing what she cleaned. Her thoughts raced ahead to eviction notices, to nights without shelter, to the child growing inside her, with nowhere to go. At one point, she returned to the ICU corridor without realizing it. Taiwo Akinyemi lay as before, unmoving. A doctor adjusted a monitor, his face tight with concern. Hauwa watched from a distance, her heart pounding. "Why does this matter so much?" she asked herself. As she turned to leave, something caught her eye. On Taiwo's wrist, partially hidden beneath medical tape, was a thin leather bracelet. The design was simple, worn smooth with age. Hauwa froze. Her breath caught in her throat. Years ago, many years ago, she had seen that bracelet before. The memory rushed in suddenly, dust heat panic. A younger Hauwa collapsed by the roadside in her village after drinking contaminated water. Her vision blurred. People gathered, unsure what to do. Then a man, not rich-looking, not guarded, had knelt beside her. He wore that same bracelet. "Stay with me," he had said, offering her his bottle, calling for help. Hauwa staggered back now, the present colliding with the past. Her knees weakened. "It can't be," she murmured. The man in the bed and the man from her memory overlapped in her mind, impossible and undeniable, all at once. A nurse cleared her throat sharply. "You're not supposed to be here." Hauwa nodded quickly and moved away, her heart racing. That evening, the supervisor called her aside again. "Management has been informed," she said. "Until further notice, you are suspended." The word hit harder than any slap. "Please," Hauwa said, her voice breaking despite her effort to stay composed. "I need this job. I can still work." The supervisor's face remained unmoved. "Collect your things." As Hauwa stepped out of the hospital at sunset, the city swallowed her whole. She stood by the gate, unsure where to go, her hand resting protectively over her belly. Behind her, in a quiet room filled with machines, Taiwo Akinyemi's heartbeat faltered, and somewhere deep inside Hauwa, an old promise stirred, one she had never expected to remember. The collapse happened in a room built for power. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows of the Akinyemi Group headquarters, casting sharp lines across the long glass table where Taiwo Akinyemi sat at the head. Around him were men and women in tailored suits, tablets, glowing voices, measured and confident. The agenda was routine quarterly logistics forecasts, port expansions, risk assessments, until it wasn't. Taiwo lifted his hand to speak, then paused. For a moment, no one noticed. He had a habit of thinking before he spoke, eyes narrowing slightly as he weighed words. But this time the pause stretched. His shoulders stiffened. A faint tremor ran through his fingers. So someone asked. Taiwo opened his mouth, but no sound came. The room tilted. The faces around him blurred into color and motion. He tried to stand, pushing against the table, but his legs failed him. The world narrowed to a ringing in his ears, and then darkness. Chairs scraped back. Someone shouted for help. A security officer caught Taiwo before he hit the floor. Within minutes, paramedics were rushing him out, sirens cutting through midday traffic. By evening, the news was everywhere. CEO Taiwo Akinyemi, hospitalized after sudden collapse, in the hospital corridors filled with people who wore concern like a uniform. Executives arrived first, then lawyers, then family. Funka Akinyemi came in silence, her face set in a mask that did not crack even when the doctor explained the severity. "He's in a coma," the doctor said carefully. "We're doing everything we can." Funk nodded once. "Make sure the press is controlled." Down the hall, Kunle Ogunlai waited until he was alone before allowing his expression to change. His eyes flickered, not with grief, but with calculation. By the next morning, Kunle had positioned himself at the center of the crisis. He spoke to board members in low, reassuring tones. He answered questions the doctors refused to answer. He reminded everyone subtly of company bylaws. "If anything happens," he said, folding his hands, "the business must continue." In the ICU, Taiwo lay suspended between worlds. Machines breathed for him. Medication flowed steadily into his veins. To the doctors, it was an unsolved medical emergency. To the board, it was a ticking clock. To Hauwa Sadiq, it was something else entirely. She was no longer employed by the hospital, but she returned anyway the following day. Not inside, just to the gate. She stood across the street, watching the building as if it might speak. Her mind replayed the image of the bracelet again and again. The man who had saved her life years ago had spoken little, but his voice had been calm, grounding. He had stayed until help arrived, refusing to leave her side. Why would someone like that end up like this, she wondered. A nurse passed through the gate carrying trash bags. Hauwa caught her eye and recognized her from the ICU floor. "Excuse me," Hauwa said softly. "Please, how is he?" The nurse hesitated. "You shouldn't be here." "I know," Hauwa replied. "Just tell me, is he alive?" The nurse's mouth tightened. "Barely." Hauwa closed her eyes. That night, back in her room, she could not sleep. Rain hammered the tin roof. The baby shifted inside her, restless. Hauwa sat up, breathing through the discomfort, her thoughts drifting back to her grandmother's voice. "Some illnesses do not come from the body alone," Mama Rabi had said. "Some are sent." At the time, Hauwa had laughed, young and dismissive. Now the words carried weight. The next day, Taiwo's condition worsened. Doctors adjusted medications, ran tests, argued quietly in corners. Dr. Ifunanya Eze, one of the younger physicians, stood over Taiwo's chart with a growing sense of unease. The symptoms did not align neatly. There were markers she could not explain. "This doesn't behave like a stroke," she said to a colleague. "Sometimes the body surprises us," the older doctor replied. "Focus on stabilization." Ifunanya nodded, but doubt lingered. In the waiting area, Funka sat with her phone pressed to her ear. "No," she said firmly. "We are not releasing any statements yet. And keep Kunle close. I want him visible." Kunle, standing a few feet away, caught her eye and offered a solemn nod. By evening, a rumor spread quietly among staff. Taiwo had stopped responding to stimuli. In Mushin, Hauwa prepared to leave her room. She wrapped her scarf tightly and tucked a small cloth bundle into her bag. Inside were dried leaves she had saved for years, more out of memory than belief. She did not know what she intended to do. She only knew she could not stay away. At the hospital gate, security stopped her. "I just want to pray," she said. "I won't go inside." One guard laughed. "Pray from your house." She stepped back, heart pounding, and waited across the street again. Inside, the ICU alarms began to sound. Taiwo's heart rate dropped dangerously low. Doctors rushed in. Orders flew. Someone called Funky. Kunle appeared at the door moments later, his face etched with concern. "What's happening?" he asked. The lead doctor removed his mask slowly. "We're losing him." For a long moment, no one spoke. "Do whatever you must," Funk said finally. "Just don't let him die." But medicine, for all its power, has limits. By midnight, Taiwo's vitals flattened into a fragile, erratic pattern. The doctors prepared the family for the worst. Outside, Hauwa felt it before she heard it. A heaviness pressed down on her chest, sudden and sharp. She clutched her belly, gasping. Tears blurred her vision. "He's going," she whispered. At that exact moment, Taiwo's heart faltered again. In the ICU, a doctor called out the time, and somewhere in the hospital, Kunle Ogunle exhaled just a little too easily. Long before, Lagos became a maze of traffic and glass buildings, Hauwa Sadiq belonged to quieter sounds. In her childhood village on the northern edge of Nigeria, mornings began with roosters and the soft scrape of sandals on dry earth. The air smelled of millet porridge and wood smoke. Children ran barefoot between compounds. Women called out greetings in voices that carried across the fields. Hauwa had not been born into comfort, but she had been born into presence, into a home where someone always noticed if you coughed twice, if your eyes looked too dull, if your spirit felt heavy. That someone was her grandmother. Mama Rabi Sadiq was the kind of old woman who seemed carved from patience. Her back was bent, her hands rough from years of work, but her eyes stayed sharp, watching, measuring, reading the world the way people read books. The village women feared her a little and respected her a lot. They came to her quietly, when a child wouldn't eat, when a husband's fever wouldn't break, when nightmares became too frequent. People called her Mama Rabi, but Hauwa called her Nana, and Nana always smelled like crushed leaves and soap made from ash. "Come," Nana would say, beckoning Hauwa with a finger. "If you want to survive this world, you must learn what the earth gives." Hauwa learned early that Nana's medicine was not magic. It was observation. It was memory. It was knowing which leaf cooled a burning stomach and which root steadied trembling hands. It was knowing when to send someone to the clinic and when the clinic would only take their money and send them back with nothing. They walked together through bush paths, Nana's stick tapping rhythmically as she spoke. "This one," Nana said one day, crouching beside a plant with broad green leaves, "is for swelling. But only if you boil it with clean water. Dirty water turns help into harm." Hauwa watched carefully, repeating the words, feeling important, chosen. But she also learned another truth. Knowledge could make you a target. There were people in the village who disliked Nana's influence. Men who wanted women to stop seeking answers. A local shop owner who sold counterfeit pills and hated when Nana's herbs worked better than his products. And sometimes there were strangers who came with smooth voices, promising modern solutions, then leaving behind sick children and emptied pockets. Nana never argued loudly. She simply did her work. "Some people don't hate you," Nana told Hauwa one evening as they sat outside sorting dried leaves. "They hate the fact that you cannot be controlled." Hauwa had been 13 when the incident happened, the day her life first brushed against Taiwo Akinyemi's, without either of them understanding what it would become. It was market day. The sun beat down mercilessly. Hauwa had been sent to fetch water from a borehole farther than usual because the nearer wells were muddy from recent rain. She carried 2 jerry cans, refusing to complain. Pride was common among village girls. It was sometimes the only thing they could own. On her way back, she stopped near the roadside where traders rested. A man offered her sachet water, smiling kindly. "You look tired," he said. Hauwa hesitated. Nana had warned her about accepting things carelessly, but the heat was cruel, and her throat felt like sand. She drank. At first nothing happened, then her vision blurred. Her stomach twisted. The ground seemed to sway. Hauwa dropped one jerrycan water, spilling into the dust like wasted life. She tried to call out, but her tongue felt heavy. People gathered, murmuring. Some stepped back fearful, as if sickness might jump from her skin onto theirs. A few women shouted for help. Someone suggested she had been cursed. Someone else said she was weak. Then a vehicle pulled over an ordinary car, not the shiny kind the village boys chased. A man stepped out wearing a simple shirt with sleeves rolled up. He was not older than his early 30s then, with calm eyes and a presence that made people quiet down without understanding why. He pushed through the crowd and knelt beside Hauwa. "Can you hear me?" he asked, voice steady. Hauwa tried to nod, but her body didn't obey. He placed 2 fingers gently against her wrist, checking her pulse the way a trained person would. Then he looked up sharply. Who gave her that water? The man who had offered it was suddenly nowhere to be found. The stranger swore under his breath softly, not for drama but from frustration. He took his own bottle from the car, opened it and tilted it carefully to Hauwa's lips. "Small sips," he said. "Breathe, stay with me." A woman called for the village clinic, but it was far and everyone knew it had no real equipment. Another man suggested they wait and see what happens. The stranger refused. He lifted Hauwa gently as if she weighed nothing and carried her to his car. The crowd gasped. "Where are you taking her?" someone demanded. "To a hospital that can actually treat poisoning," he snapped back. "Move." Hauwa's last clear image before darkness took her was the leather bracelet on his wrist, thin, worn, familiar even then, as if it carried history of its own. When Hauwa woke hours later, her mouth was dry, her body aching, but she was alive. Nana was there sitting beside her bed, eyes rimmed red with fear she had tried to hide. And the stranger was gone. The nurse said he had paid the bill in full and left quietly after making sure Hauwa was stable. "What is his name?" Nana had asked. The nurse shrugged. He didn't give it. Back in the village, Hauwa expected the story to end there. But Nana did not let it become just another tale people repeated and forgot. She made Hauwa sit with her outside their compound the next evening and listen, as if it was a lesson written into the sky. "Someone wanted to harm you," Nana said, plainly. "Not because you are special, but because the world is full of people who like to test how cheap a life can be." Hauwa's voice trembled. "Why would someone do that?" Nana's gaze was far away. Greed, anger, sometimes just sport. Hauwa stared at the dirt. "If that man didn't come, I would have died." "Yes," Nana said, and her voice softened. "And that is why you must remember kindness can arrive wearing any face." For weeks after Nana became stricter with Hauwa, she taught her to recognize bitter scents that didn't belong in water. She taught her which leaves countered toxins and which soothed lungs in a person who seemed to be slipping away. It was during one of those lessons years later, when Hauwa was about 16, that Nana said something that stayed with her like a hidden stone in her pocket. They were sitting near the back of the compound, away from listening ears. Nana laid out a small bundle of dried leaves, darker than most, with a scent that was sharp and clean. "This one," Nana said, "is not for ordinary sickness." Hauwa leaned closer. "What is it?" For Nana lowered her voice. "For someone whose breath is being stolen." Hauwa frowned. "Stolen by who?" Nana's eyes lifted to the sky briefly, as if asking for patience with a child's questions. "Sometimes illness is not only illness. Sometimes it is arranged. Poison can be science, but it can also be intention." Hauwa swallowed. "So this leaf can cure poison?" Nana shook her head. "Not cure, not always, but it can buy time. It can wake the body enough for other help to work. It is a bridge, not the destination." She pressed the dried leaves into Hauwa's palm. "You will not use this for money. You will not use it to show off. And you will not mention it to people who enjoy rumors." Hauwa's fingers curled around the leaves. "When will I need it?" Nana held her gaze with unsettling seriousness. "When you see someone surrounded by power but still helpless. When doctors say it is finished and something in you refuses to accept it." Hauwa felt a chill despite the heat. "How will I know?" Nana's voice became a whisper. "Because your spirit will recognize the moment, and when it comes you must be brave enough to be mocked." Years later in Lagos, Hauwa would try to forget those words. Life in the city was loud and impatient. People laughed at village wisdom. They called it superstition. They demanded proof and certificates and stamped documents for everything, even compassion. But now, with Taiwo Akinyemi lying in a hospital bed and his bracelet pulling the past into the present, Nana's warning returned with force. Hauwa sat in her rented room that night, rain tapping the roof like persistent fingers. She opened her cloth bundle and stared at the dried leaves she had carried all these years. Not because she believed she would need them, but because Nana had told her never to throw them away. Her hand trembled. In the distance, Lagos traffic roared like an ocean indifferent. In the hospital, Taiwo's body fought silently against something no one had named yet. And deep in the shadows around him, shadows made of ambition, paperwork, and smiling faces, plans were tightening like a noose. Hauwa looked down at her belly and whispered, not to the baby alone, but to herself. "If they say it's finished, and I still have breath, then maybe I was brought here for a reason." Morning light crept through the hospital windows with a false sense of calm. The building looked the same as it always did. Polished floors, muted voices, the soft beeping of machines. But inside tension thickened the air. Hauwa Sadiq stood near the back entrance, her hands folded over the strap of her worn bag. She had barely slept. The weight of the night pressed behind her eyes, and the baby inside her shifted restlessly, as if sensing her fear. She had not come to beg for her job back. She had come because she could not ignore what she knew. Inside her bag, wrapped carefully in cloth, were the dried leaves Nana had given her years ago. Hauwa had spent hours the night before, preparing them the way she remembered, washing them with clean water, crushing them gently, whispering a prayer she hadn't spoken since childhood. Not because she believed prayer alone could save anyone, but because Nana had taught her that intention mattered. At the security desk, the guard recognized her immediately. "You again," he scoffed. "Didn't they tell you not to come back?" "I need to speak to a doctor," Hauwa said quietly. "Doctor Ifunanya Eze," the guard laughed. "You think doctors have time for cleaners?" "Please," Hauwa said, forcing herself to meet his eyes. "It's about Mr. Taiwo Akinyemi." The laughter faded just slightly. "Wait, there," the guard muttered, gesturing to a bench near the wall. "I'll ask." Minutes dragged by. Hauwa watched people pass, families clutching documents, nurses moving with purpose, men in suits speaking into phones with hushed urgency. No one looked at her twice. Finally, Dr. Ifunanya appeared at the corridor's end. She stopped when she saw Hauwa, surprise flickering across her face. "You," Ifunanya said softly, approaching. "You were suspended." "I know," Hauwa replied. "I won't stay. I just need 1 minute." Ifunanya hesitated. She glanced around, then lowered her voice. "This is not a good time." "That's why I'm here," Hauwa said. "They say his condition doesn't make sense. It's because something was done to him." Ifunanya's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Hauwa opened her bag slightly, just enough for the doctor to see the cloth bundle. "This is not magic," she said quickly, anticipating judgment. "It won't cure him, but it can help him breathe. It can give you time." Before Ifunanya could respond, footsteps echoed sharply behind them. "What is this?" The voice was cold, authoritative. Funke Akinyemi stood a few paces away, dressed impeccably in a dark, tailored outfit. Her eyes moved from Hauwa, to the bag, then back with clear disdain. "Who is this woman?" Funka asked. Ifunanya straightened. I know who she is," Funka cut in. "A cleaner, or former cleaner. Why is she harassing my brother's medical team?" Hauwa's throat tightened. "Ma," she began, respectfully. "I just want to help. I believe someone poisoned him." The word hung in the air like an insult. Funka's lips curled. "Poisoned? Are you listening to yourself? She's from the village." Funka continued, turning to Ifunanya. "They always think illness is witchcraft when things go wrong. This is not witchcraft," Hauwa said, her voice trembling but firm. "It is knowledge passed down. Please just test it." Funk laughed a sharp, humorless sound. "Test what leaves from the bush." She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only the three of them could hear. "Do you know how many people would love to claim they have a miracle right now? Do you know how dangerous rumors are?" Hauwa swallowed. "I don't want attention. I don't want money." Funk's eyes flicked to Hauwa's stomach. "You want sympathy. Or you want a story." That hurt more than Hauwa expected. Ifunanya cleared her throat. "Ma'am, with respect, we are running out of options." Funka raised a hand. "Enough. I will not have a desperate pregnant woman experimenting on my brother." "Security!" the word echoed. Two guards appeared almost instantly, as if summoned by the tension itself. "Escort her out," Funka said, already turning away. Hauwa felt panic surge. "Please," she said, her voice cracking. "I watched him die once before. I can't watch it again." Funk stopped mid-step. "What did you say?" Hauwa realized too late that she had spoken without thinking. "Years ago," she whispered. "He saved my life. I recognize him." Funk turned slowly, studying Hauwa's face, as if seeing her for the first time. "You expect me to believe that my brother, a billionaire CEO, crossed paths with you in some village?" "Yes," Hauwa said. "He didn't know who I was. He just helped." For a split second, something unreadable crossed Funka's expression. Then it hardened. "Remove her," she repeated. The guards grabbed Hauwa's arms. "No!" Hauwa cried, instinctively shielding her belly. "Please don't push me. I'm pregnant." One guard loosened his grip, slightly uncomfortable. The other did not. People stared as Hauwa was dragged down the corridor. Whispers followed. "Is she crazy? Trying to take advantage? Poor thing. But this is not the place." Dr. Ifunanya stood frozen, guilt-twisting in her chest. She wanted to speak to stop it, but authority pressed down on her like a weight. At the ICU doors, Hauwa twisted around one last time. "Dr. Ifunanya," she called out. "Check his IV supply. Something is wrong." The doors closed behind her with a heavy finality. Outside sunlight hit Hauwa's face harshly as the guards pushed her beyond the gate. She stumbled, catching herself on the wall. Tears blurred her vision, but she refused to let them fall. She sank onto the pavement, breathing hard, her body shaking. "I tried," she whispered to the child inside her. "I tried." Across the street, she sat there for hours, watching ambulances come and go, listening to the city move on, as if nothing inside that hospital mattered. Inside, Taiwo Akinyemi's condition deteriorated further. Doctors adjusted medication again, confusion deepening as his organs showed signs of stress that did not align with any clear diagnosis. Dr. Ifunanya reviewed the charts late into the afternoon, Hauwa's words replaying in her mind. "Check his IV supply." She hesitated only a moment before pulling the file closer. That evening, Kunle Ogunle arrived with lawyers in tow. He spoke quietly with Funka, his tone grave. "The board is growing anxious," Kunle said. "If Taiwo doesn't improve soon, we'll have to consider formal steps." Funka nodded, exhaustion etched into her face. "Do what you must." Kunle's gaze drifted briefly toward the ICU doors, then away. Outside, as night fell, Hauwa finally stood. Her legs ached. Her back throbbed, but her resolve sharpened into something unyielding. She reached into her bag and felt the cloth bundle beneath her fingers. "They can laugh," she murmured. "They can throw me out." She took a steadying breath. "But if they say it's finished, and he still has breath, then I won't walk away." Above her, hospital lights glowed like distant stars, cold, unreachable. And somewhere between those lights and the dark street below, a line was being crossed. Night settled over Lagos, with a heavy, restless heat, the kind that pressed against the skin and made sleep feel like a rumor rather than a promise. Hauwa Sadiq walked slowly through the streets, her steps unsteady, her mind louder than the traffic that roared past her. She had nowhere to go. The landlord's words echoed in her head 1 month, but even that small mercy had already begun to slip away. Tonight she could not bear the narrow room, the damp walls, the feeling of waiting for life to happen to her. Tonight she needed to do something. She found herself drifting toward the old bus park near Oshodi, where people slept in clusters. Drivers, vendors, women with children curled against them like shields. Hauwa sat on a low concrete slab and lowered her head, breathing through the ache in her back. The baby kicked sharper this time, as if protesting her stillness. "I know," she whispered, rubbing her belly. "I know." Across the street, a radio played softly, broadcasting news in English and Yoruba. Hauwa caught fragments: critical condition, prominent CEO, prayers requested. She closed her eyes. Inside the hospital, Taiwo Akinyemi hovered on the edge of a decision no one could make for him. His heart beat erratically, as if unsure whether to continue. Machines kept him tethered to the present, but his body resisted with quiet determination. Dr. Ifunanya Eze had not gone home. She sat alone in the dim staff office, Taiwo's file spread open before her. The pages were familiar now, yet something about them felt wrong. Too neat, too carefully documented. She traced the medication timeline with her finger, her jaw tightening. The labs didn't add up. Ifunanya pulled up the IV supply log and scanned the entries. Her eyes narrowed. A particular batch number appeared again and again, administered during critical moments, delivered under expedited approval. Her stomach sank. She opened a drawer and retrieved her phone, hesitating only a second before dialing. "Hello," she said quietly. "I need you to check something for me." Discreetly. Outside, Hauwa watched a woman soothe a crying toddler with practiced patience. The sight made her chest ache. She reached into her bag and felt the cloth bundle warm now from her body heat. Nana's voice rose in her memory, firm and unwavering. "When you see someone surrounded by power but still helpless," Hauwa straightened slowly. Her decision formed not as a thought, but as a weight settling into place. She would go back. Not to ask permission, not to explain. She would go back because someone had to. Rain began to fall, sudden and heavy, drenching the streets within minutes. Hauwa pulled her scarf tighter and started walking. Each step sent a dull pain through her hips, but she welcomed it. It reminded her she was still here, still capable. By the time she reached the hospital, the rain had soaked her clothes through. The gate guards eyed her suspiciously. "You again," one muttered. "I just need water," Hauwa said, pointing to the public tap near the wall. "I won't go inside." They waved her off, uninterested. Hauwa filled a small container and moved aside, pretending to drink. Her heart pounded. Timing mattered. Courage mattered more. Inside, Kunle Ogunle stood near the ICU doors, speaking on his phone in a low voice. "Yes," he said. "We're close. The doctors will declare it if there's no change by morning. Make sure the paperwork is ready." He ended the call and exhaled, smoothing his jacket. The night shift suited him: fewer eyes, fewer questions. He did not see Dr. Ifunanya watching him from the far end of the corridor, her face unreadable. When Kunle finally left, Ifunanya moved quickly. She accessed the supply room with her card, pulled the questionable IV batch and sealed it in a sterile bag. Her hands trembled, not with fear but with anger. She glanced at the clock. Time was slipping. Outside, Hauwa waited until the guard nearest the entrance stepped away to answer a call. She moved, then swiftly, quietly slipping through the side door she had used countless times as a cleaner. The familiarity steadied her nerves. She kept her head down, walking with purpose. No one stopped her. Pregnant women were common in hospitals. Desperation made them invisible. Near the ICU, she paused in a storage alcove and opened her bag. With careful hands, she prepared the herb the way Nana had taught her, mixing the crushed leaves with clean water, whispering words meant to focus her own trembling spirit, rather than summon miracles. "Be steady," she told herself. "This is not magic. This is care." A contraction seized her, suddenly sharp and unexpected. Hauwa gasped, gripping the counter as pain radiated through her abdomen. Panic flared. "No," she whispered. "Not now." She breathed through it, slow and controlled, counting as Nana had taught her for moments of fear. The pain eased, leaving her shaken but standing. She pressed a hand to her belly. "Just a little longer," she pleaded. Down the corridor, Dr. Ifunanya approached, her footsteps urgent. She stopped short when she saw Hauwa emerge from the alcove. "You came back," Ifunanya said, a mixture of shock and relief in her voice. "I had to," Hauwa replied. "Did you find anything?" Ifunanya held up the sealed bag. The IV supply was tampered with. "I'm almost certain now." Hauwa's knees nearly gave way. "Then he was poisoned." "Yes," Ifunanya said. "And your herb, it slowed something." "I don't fully understand how, but it did." They stood there, the weight of the moment pressing down on them both. "If we do this," Ifunanya said carefully, "there will be consequences. For you, for me." Hauwa met her gaze without hesitation. "I already lost everything." Alarm sounded faintly from the ICU. Ifunanya didn't waste another second. "Come." They moved together, slipping into the ICU while the night nurse attended another patient. Hauwa's heart thundered in her ears as she approached Taiwo's bed. He looked smaller than she remembered, stripped of power by wires and silence. She felt a rush of grief, not for the man he was to the world, but for the man who had once knelt beside a dying village girl without asking her name. Hauwa raised the small cup with shaking hands. Ifunanya adjusted the monitor settings, watching closely. Slowly, she whispered, "Just a small amount." Hauwa touched the liquid to Taiwo's lips. For a terrifying second, nothing happened. Then the monitor flickered. A faint change so small it could have been imagined. Ifunanya leaned closer, her breath catching. "It's doing something," she murmured. Footsteps echoed outside the door. Funke Akinyemi's voice rang out sharp with alarm. "What is going on in there?" Ifunanya stiffened. Hauwa's pulse raced. They had been seen. Guards rushed in, moments later followed by Funke, her eyes blazing with fury. "I warned you," Funke said, pointing at Hauwa. "I warned you." Hauwa did not step back. She stood her ground, one hand on the bed, the other over her belly. "I'm not here to harm him," she said quietly. "I'm here because someone already did." Funk's laugh was brittle. "You think accusations will save you?" Before anyone could respond, the monitor emitted a clearer sound, a stronger beat. Silence fell. Every eye turned to the screen. Taiwo Akinyemi's heart rate, though still fragile, had stabilized just enough to defy the word "finished." For the first time that night, Funke did not speak. Guards hesitated, uncertain. Dr. Ifunanya straightened, her voice steady despite the storm gathering around them. "We need more time." Hauwa felt tears burn her eyes, but she did not let them fall. Not yet. This was only the beginning. The ICU no longer felt like a place of healing. It felt like a courtroom without a judge. Every sound seemed louder, the hiss of oxygen, the steady mechanical breathing, the soft but undeniable beep, beep, beep of the monitor that had just betrayed everyone's certainty. Taiwo Akinyemi was not improving, not waking, not speaking, but he was no longer slipping away. And that single fact changed everything. Funke Akinyemi stood rigid at the foot of the bed, her hands clenched so tightly that her knuckles had gone pale. She stared at the monitor as if it were lying to her. For years she had trusted numbers, reports, forecasts. Now a machine was daring to contradict the future she had already begun to prepare for. "This means nothing," she said finally, her voice sharp. "A temporary fluctuation." Dr. Ifunanya did not look away from the screen. "It means his heart responded to an intervention after hours of decline," she replied evenly. "That is not nothing." The guards shifted uncomfortably. One of them glanced between Funke and Hauwa, uncertain which authority to obey. Hauwa stood beside the bed, her legs trembling beneath her soaked clothes. She felt exposed, painfully aware of how small she looked in that room, pregnant, poor, surrounded by power. Yet something in her spine had straightened. For the first time since she entered the hospital, she did not feel like she was begging. Kunle Ogunle arrived moments later, his expression carefully neutral as he took in the scene. His eyes flicked first to Taiwo, then to the monitor, and finally, briefly, to Hauwa. "What happened?" he asked. Funk answered for him. This woman forced her way in and interfered. Kunle frowned slightly, performing concern. "Interfered? How with bush medicine?" Funke snapped. "Superstition." Kunle's gaze lingered on the small cup still in Hauwa's hand. And yet he said slowly, "The monitor shows improvement." Hauwa felt a chill. There was something in his tone, too measured, too interested. Dr. Ifunanya spoke before Hauwa could. "We were about to declare death," she said. Then the patient responded. Kunle nodded thoughtfully. "Then we must be cautious. The hospital's reputation is at stake." Funk turned to the guards. "Remove her. Now." No, Dr. Ifunanya said louder than she intended. The word echoed. Everyone stared at her. "If we remove her now," Ifunanya continued, her voice steadying, "we lose the chance to understand what just happened. We are doctors. Our duty is to the patient." Funk's eyes narrowed. "Your duty is to protocol, and protocol failed him," Ifunanya replied. For a moment it seemed Funk might explode. Then she exhaled sharply and turned away. "Fine," she said. "But this ends now. Security, take her to administration. I want a full report." The guard stepped forward again. This time, Hauwa did not resist. As they let her out, she glanced back at Taiwo one last time. His chest rose and fell with artificial rhythm, but beneath it his heart fought quietly. "I'll come back," she whispered, unsure if she meant it as a promise or a prayer. In a sterile conference room on the hospital's upper floor, Hauwa sat alone at a long table that gleamed under harsh white lights. Her clothes were still damp. Her fingers were numb. A hospital administrator entered with a tablet, followed by 2 security officers. "You are being detained for questioning," the administrator said, without looking at her. "You interfered with critical care." Hauwa nodded slowly. "I understand. Do you have any formal medical training?" "No." "Any license?" "No." The administrator finally looked up. "Then what you did was illegal." Hauwa met her gaze. "So, is poisoning someone?" The administrator paused. "That's a serious accusation," she said. "So is declaring someone dead when they're not," Hauwa replied. The administrator pressed her lips together and tapped something into the tablet. "Until we determine what actually occurred," she said, "you will remain here." The door closed behind her with a dull finality. Downstairs, Dr. Ifunanya stood in the supply room. Her hands braced against the counter as she tried to steady her breathing. The sealed IV bag lay in front of her, like a confession waiting to be spoken. She pulled out her phone and made another call. "I need toxicology," she said quietly. "Full panel, no delays." Kunle Ogunlai walked down the corridor, his mind racing. This was not how it was supposed to go. He had planned for chaos, yes, but controlled chaos. A slow decline, a tragic announcement, a seamless transition. The board trusted him. Funk relied on him. The documents were nearly ready. And now this. A poor pregnant woman with leaves from the bush had disrupted everything. Kunle entered a private office and locked the door. He dialed a number from memory. "Things changed," he said when the line connected. "We may need to accelerate." A pause. "Yes," Kunle continued. "Tonight." He ended the call and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. His reflection in the dark glass looked calm, composed, but beneath it, something twisted. In the holding room, Hauwa rested her head against the table, exhaustion pulling at her bones. The baby stirred again, sharper this time. "I'm trying," she whispered. "Please don't give up on me." Memories flooded her Nana's hands, guiding hers the stranger's calm voice years ago. The sound of Taiwo's heart fighting back. She did not regret what she had done. Even if they punished her, even if they mocked her, even if she lost everything she had seen the truth with her own eyes. He had responded. Hours passed. Night deepened. Then the door opened. Dr. Ifunanya stepped inside her face, pale but determined. "Hauwa," she said softly. Hauwa lifted her head. He's still alive," Ifunanya replied. "Stable. But that's not why I'm here." She placed the sealed IV bag on the table between them. "This," she said, "contains a compound that should never have been in his system. It mimics organ failure while avoiding immediate detection." Hauwa stared at it. "So I was right." "Yes." "Who did it?" Ifunanya hesitated. "I can't prove that yet, but I know who benefits." Hauwa's mind went instantly to Kunle, to his careful voice, to the way his eyes had lingered. "What happens now?" Hauwa asked. Ifunanya took a breath. "Now it becomes dangerous." A distant alarm rang out somewhere in the hospital, sharp, urgent. Ifunanya's phone buzzed in her hand. She looked at the screen and went still. "They're declaring him clinically dead again," she said. His vitals dropped. Hauwa stood abruptly, pain shooting through her body. "No," she said. "Not yet." "Hauwa." "I need to go back," Hauwa insisted. "There's more." "Nana said the first dose only buys time." Ifunanya's eyes widened. "You didn't say that before." "I didn't think they would listen," Hauwa replied. "But now they have to." Another alarm blared louder this time. They did not speak again. They ran. When they reached the ICU, chaos had returned. Nurses moved quickly. A doctor called out times. Funk stood near the wall, her face ashen. Kunle was there too. His expression grave, but his eyes betrayed urgency. "The patient has no pulse," the lid doctor said. "Prepare to call it." Hauwa pushed forward. "Wait," she said, her voice cutting through the room. "You already waited once. Give me one more minute." The doctor hesitated. "We don't have time for please," Hauwa said. "1 minute." Silence fell again. All eyes turned to the monitor, to Taiwo Akinyemi, to the thin line between finished and not yet. The word minute felt enormous in the ICU. It stretched heavy and uncertain, pressing against every breath in the room. The lead doctor stared at the monitor, then at Hauwa, then back at the monitor again, as if willing it to make the decision for him. "We're already past protocol," he said finally. "If this goes wrong," it already did, Dr. Ifunanya Eze cut in, stepping closer to the bed. "We declared him dead once today. And we were wrong." Funka Akinyemi's voice trembled with fury, barely contained. "This is madness." You are gambling with my brother's dignity. Hauwa swallowed. Her legs shook, pain pulsing through her lower back, but she held herself upright. I'm not asking you to believe in me, she said quietly. I'm asking you to believe in what you just saw. The doctor exhaled sharply. 1 minute, he said. That's all. Kunle Ogunle's jaw tightened. He took a small step forward. Doctor, he said calmly, we must consider the legal consequences. Enough, the doctor snapped. Everyone step back. Ifunanya moved swiftly, adjusting the monitor and preparing the equipment. Hauwa's hands trembled as she took the small container from her bag, what remained of the mixture she had prepared earlier. This time, she added the second component. Nana had warned her about a thin infusion that carried a sharper scent. The first, wakes the body, Nana's voice echoed in her memory. The second, reminds it how to breathe. Hauwa leaned closer to Taiwo's face. His skin was cool, his lips pale. For a fleeting moment, doubt surged through her. What if she was wrong? What if Nana's knowledge belonged to a world that no longer existed? Then she remembered the monitor's flicker, the heart that had refused to surrender. Please, she whispered, not to Taiwo alone, but to whatever listened when people reached the edge. Come back. She touched the mixture gently to his lips. Seconds passed. Nothing. The monitor continued its flat, accusing line. Funk let out a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. This is cruelty, she said. Stop this. The doctor opened his mouth to call it. Then the line jumped. A single, unmistakable beat pierced the silence. Beep. Everyone froze. Another beat followed. Beep. The monitor scrambled, numbers reappearing like startled birds returning to a branch. Taiwo's chest jerked faintly, not a full breath, but a reflex undeniable, defiant. The room erupted. What did you do? A nurse whispered. The doctor stared at the screen, disbelief etched into his face. That's spontaneous cardiac activity. Funk staggered back, gripping the wall for support. No, she whispered. This can't be happening. Kunle's eyes darkened. Security rushed in, drawn by the alarms and raised voices. Orders overlapped. Someone called for the head of cardiology. Another nurse began documenting everything frantically. Hauwa stepped back, dizziness washing over her. The pain in her abdomen flared sharply, stealing her breath. She clutched the bed rail, sweat beading on her forehead. Ifunanya noticed immediately. Sit, she said firmly, guiding Hauwa to a chair. You're not okay. I'm fine, Hauwa lied, breathing shallowly. Just let me stay. But the room's focus shifted quickly. This needs to be investigated, the lead doctor said. We cannot ignore what just happened. Funk found her voice again, brittle and sharp. Investigated, yes, but she needs to be removed. Now. Kunle nodded in agreement. For her own safety, he added smoothly. People are already asking questions. Hauwa looked up at him, then really looked. Something in his eyes slid away too quickly when she met his gaze. Before she could speak, security approached. Ma'am. One guard said less aggressive than before, but firm, we have orders. Hauwa stood slowly, one hand pressed protectively to her belly. I will go, she said, but don't call him dead again. No one answered. This time they didn't take her to a conference room. They took her to a small security office near the hospital's rear wing. The walls were bare. The chair was hard. A camera blinked red in the corner. An officer sat across from her with a notepad. Name, he said. Hauwa Sadiq. Occupation, cleaner, former cleaner. He glanced at her stomach. And you interfered with ICU care using plants. Hauwa nodded. Yes. Do you understand that you could be charged? Yes. Why did you do it? Hauwa's voice wavered for the first time. Because someone tried to kill him. The officer paused, pen hovering. That's a serious claim, I know. In the corridor outside, Kunle paced slowly, his phone pressed to his ear. "This is becoming a problem," he said in a low voice. "The doctor is asking for toxicology. We need to contain this." A pause. "No," Kunle continued. "Not yet. Let them run the tests. If nothing shows, it discredits her." He ended the call and slipped the phone into his pocket, just as Dr. Ifunanya approached. "The IV supply you approved," she said quietly, "is missing from the cabinet." Kunle raised an eyebrow. "Are you accusing me?" "I'm asking questions," Ifunanya replied. "And I won't stop." Kunle smiled thinly. "Be careful, doctor. Curiosity can ruin careers." Hours passed. Hauwa sat alone in the security office, her body aching, her mind racing. The baby moved again, stronger this time. She breathed through it, counting, focusing. "I did what I could," she whispered. "Now it's your turn." Late into the night, the door opened. Dr. Ifunanya stepped inside, exhaustion etched into her face, but also resolve. "The tests are back," she said quietly. "They found traces of a synthetic compound in his bloodstream. It explains everything." Hauwa's heart pounded. "So they believe me. They believe something happened," Ifunanya said. "But the administration is nervous. Powerful people are involved," Kunle Hauwa said. Ifunanya didn't deny it. "Can he stop this?" Hauwa asked. "He'll try." As if summoned by the thought, an alarm blared faintly through the walls, different from before. Urgent, persistent. Ifunanya's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and cursed under her breath. "They're moving Taiwo to declare brain death," she said. "Legally, tonight." Hauwa stood abruptly, pain slicing through her body. "No," she said. "They can't." "They can," Ifunanya replied grimly. "Unless we stop them." How Ifunanya met her gaze. "We need time, and we need proof to reach the board before the declaration." Hauwa felt fear rise like a tide, but beneath it something stronger took shape. "Then we don't let them finish," she said. Ifunanya nodded once. "Get ready. This isn't over." Somewhere down the hall, Kunle Ogunle watched doctors move with quiet urgency, his expression calm, his thoughts racing. The plan was slipping. And when powerful men feel control leaving their hands, they do dangerous things. The hospital changed after midnight. It always did, but tonight the change felt deliberate. Corridors that once hummed with routine quiet now carried a sharpened urgency. Doors closed more often. Voices dropped lower. Decisions were made in corners away from witnesses. Hauwa Sadiq sat on the edge of the narrow bench in the security office, her back rigid, her hands folded over her belly as another wave of discomfort rolled through her. She breathed carefully the way Nana had taught her, slow and slower out until the tightness eased. Across from her, Dr. Ifunanya Eze stood reading a printout, her eyes scanning line after line with focused intensity. "The compound they found," Ifunanya said at last, "is rare. Not illegal on its own. But in this dosage administered repeatedly, it mimics organ failure. It makes the body look like it's giving up." Hauwa swallowed. "So they wanted him to die quietly." "Quietly," Ifunanya agreed. "And convincingly." She tapped the page with her finger. "This doesn't happen by accident. Someone with access to procurement had to authorize it. Someone who knew his medical vulnerabilities." Hauwa didn't hesitate. "Kunle Ogunle." Ifunanya looked at her sharply. "Why are you so sure?" Hauwa closed her eyes briefly, recalling Kunle's calm voice, the way his gaze slid away when the monitor reacted. "Because he wasn't surprised," she said. "Everyone else was scared. He was annoyed." Ifunanya nodded slowly. "That matches what I'm seeing." She tucked the papers into a folder. "We need to move fast. Once they declare brain death, the board will activate succession protocols. Even if Taiwo recovers later, the damage will be irreversible." "Can we stop it?" Hauwa asked. "We can delay it," Ifunanya replied. and buy time to get this evidence to the board people who aren't under Kunle's influence. Hauwa shifted, pain flaring again. She winced, pressing her palm to her abdomen. Ifunanya noticed immediately. "You're not well." "I'm fine," Hauwa insisted. "Please." Ifunanya hesitated, then sighed. "All right, but you sit when I tell you to." They stepped out into the corridor together, moving carefully, blending into the night staff traffic. The ICU doors loomed ahead, guarded more closely now. Inside, Taiwo Akinyemi lay still, his condition fragile but stubbornly holding. The monitors displayed a rhythm that felt like defiance. Funke Akinyemi stood nearby, arms folded tightly across her chest. She looked exhausted, her composure fraying at the edges. "Doctor," she said sharply when she saw Ifunanya. "What is taking so long?" Ifunanya met her gaze. "We found evidence of external interference. We need to pause any declaration until it's reviewed." Funk's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. "Interference by whom? That is under investigation," Ifunanya replied. Kunle, standing just behind Funk, stepped forward smoothly. With respect, he said, "This is reckless. The longer we delay, the more the press will speculate. The company cannot afford uncertainty. The patient cannot afford certainty." Ifunanya shot back. "Not the wrong kind." Kunle's smile tightened. "You're letting emotion cloud your judgment." At that moment, the head of cardiology approached his face, drawn. "We've received instructions from administration," he said. "They want a neurological assessment completed within the hour." Hauwa felt her heart drop. "They're pushing it," Ifunanya murmured. Hauwa took a step forward before she could stop herself. "If you declare him brain dead," she said quietly, "you end his chance to come back." The cardiologist frowned. "And who are you?" "A witness," Hauwa replied, "to what he was before you decided he was finished." Kunle scoffed. "This is absurd." But before anyone could respond, a nurse hurried in, breathless. "Doctor, there's a problem with the IV records. Procurement approvals don't match delivery logs." Kunle's head snapped toward her. "What do you mean?" "The batch administered tonight was approved under your signature," the nurse continued, unaware of the tension she had just ignited. "But the delivery timestamp is inconsistent." Silence fell like a blade. Funk turned slowly to Kunle. "Is that true?" Kunle recovered quickly. "Of course it's my signature. I oversee procurement." "That doesn't mean it means access," Ifunanya said. "And opportunity." Kunle's eyes hardened. "You're overstepping." Before the argument could escalate, Hauwa's body betrayed her. A sudden, intense pain seized her, sharper than anything before. She gasped, bending forward instinctively, a low cry escaping her throat. Hauwa Ifunanya rushed to her side. The world tilted. Hauwa clutched Ifunanya's arm, sweat breaking out across her forehead. "It hurts," she whispered. "Something's wrong." The cardiologist swore under his breath. "She needs to sit down. Now." They guided Hauwa to a chair, nurses appearing instantly, professional instincts overriding politics. "How far along?" a nurse asked. "Almost 6 months." Hauwa breathed. Another contraction rolled through her, stealing her breath. Panic surged. Ifunanya crouched in front of her. "Listen to me," she said firmly. "Focus on breathing. In through your nose, out slowly." Hauwa nodded, tears spilling despite her effort to stay composed. "I can't lose him," she whispered, meaning the baby, meaning Taiwo, meaning everything she was fighting for. "You won't," Ifunanya said, though. Fear flickered in her eyes. Funke watched from a distance, conflict flickering across her face. For the first time her gaze softened, not with kindness, but with something like reluctant awareness. Kunle, however, stepped back, pulling out his phone. "This distraction changes nothing," he muttered. Ifunanya noticed. "Put the phone away." Kunle ignored her. Minutes passed in tense quiet as Hauwa's pain subsided slightly, leaving her shaken but conscious. "I'm okay," Hauwa said weakly. "Please don't stop." The head of cardiology looked between Hauwa and Taiwo. "We can delay the neurological declaration," he said slowly, but only briefly. "That's all we need," Ifunanya replied. "Time." She turned to Funka. "Ma'am, if there is even a chance your brother was poisoned, wouldn't you want the truth before signing his life away?" Funk's jaw tightened. She looked at Taiwo, then back at Kunle. "What aren't you telling me?" she asked quietly. Kunle met her gaze. Nothing, but his voice lacked conviction. Funk inhaled sharply. "Delay the declaration," she said to the doctor. "I want a full internal review." Kunle's head snapped toward her. "Funky enough," she said. "I will not be rushed into burying my brother." The doctor nodded and moved off to issue orders. Kunle stared after him, fury barely contained. He turned and walked away, without another word. Hauwa sagged back into the chair, relief washing over her like rain after drought. "We bought time," Ifunanya whispered. "For how long?" Hauwa asked. Ifunanya's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and grimaced. "Not long." Kunle will push back, hard. Hauwa closed her eyes, gathering what strength she had left. "Then we use it." In a private office down the hall, Kunle paced, his mask slipping. He dialed a number with shaking fingers. "They're stalling," he hissed. "We need a contingency." A pause. "Yes," he continued, "before dawn." He ended the call and stared at his reflection in the dark window. The man looking back at him was still composed, but cracks had begun to show. Back in the ICU, Taiwo Akinyemi's heart beat on, fragile but determined. And somewhere between truth and power, the line was tightening. Dawn crept toward the city without apology. Lagos did not pause for anyone's crisis. Not for the powerful, not for the poor, not even for a man hovering between breath and silence in an ICU. Outside the hospital, horns blared and vendors called out prices. Inside, the night's fragile truce began to fracture. Hauwa Sadiq sat in a wheelchair, now insisted upon by the nurses, despite her protests. Her legs still shook from the contractions that had come and gone like warnings. She watched the ICU doors from across the corridor, counting every footstep that approached them, every voice that rose or fell. Dr. Ifunanya Eze returned with a thin folder pressed against her chest. Her eyes were red, not from tears but from hours without rest. "They're pushing again," Ifunanya said quietly. "Administration wants a neurological panel before sunrise." Hauwa's fingers tightened around the armrest. "Kunle." Ifunanya nodded. "Through proxies. Legal language. He's careful. Careful." That word scraped against Hauwa's nerves. Kunle's care had never looked like concern. It looked like control. As if summoned by the thought, Kunle Ogunlai appeared at the far end of the corridor, flanked by two men in tailored suits Hauwa didn't recognize. Lawyers. He walked with calm purpose, the image of stability. Funke Akinyemi followed a few steps behind her face, pale eyes ringed with exhaustion. She looked torn, pulled between the brother she loved and the system she trusted to keep her safe. Kunle stopped near the nurse's station and leaned in to speak with the head administrator. His voice was low, but Hauwa caught fragments as they drifted down the hall. "Company exposure cannot delay indefinitely, best interest of all parties." Hauwa felt a familiar tightening in her chest. Nana's voice rose unbidden. "Watch the quiet ones when they think they're winning." Ifunanya touched Hauwa's shoulder. "I need to speak to the ethics committee," she said. "Stay here. Don't move." Hauwa nodded, though her gaze never left Kunle. Minutes passed. The suits moved away. Kunle stepped into a side corridor, pulling out his phone. Hauwa's heart began to pound. "Wheel me closer," she whispered to the nurse nearby. The nurse hesitated. "You're not supposed to," please, Hauwa said. "Just closer. I need air. The nurse sighed and nudged the wheelchair forward, stopping near a column that partially concealed them from view. Kunle's voice floated back clearer now. Yes, he said softly into the phone. The delay is a nuisance. A pause. No, the doctor is the problem, Kunle continued. And the woman, she's unpredictable. Hauwa's pulse thundered in her ears. Another pause. Kunle turned slightly his back to the corridor. I told you we can't afford a miracle, he said. If he wakes, everything unravels. Hauwa sucked in a breath, the words striking like a blow. Kunle went on colder now. Tonight, before the board meets, make sure it looks clinical. The call ended. Hauwa's hands shook violently. She pressed them to her belly, grounding herself. Breathe, she told herself. Remember the leaves. Remember the bridge. Ifunanya returned just as Kunle stepped back into the main corridor. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. Something sharp passed between them. Hauwa, Ifunanya said urgently. What's wrong? He said tonight. Hauwa whispered. He said it has to look clinical. Ifunanya went still. Are you sure I heard him? Hauwa said. He doesn't want Taiwo to wake up. Ifunanya's jaw clenched. Then we're out of time. They moved quickly, too quickly for subtlety now. Ifunanya pulled Hauwa into a quiet alcove near the staff elevators. We need proof that reaches the board now, Ifunanya said. The toxicology alone won't stop him if he controls the narrative. What about the IV records? Hauwa asked. The approvals. If we can tie the compound directly to Kunle's authorization. Yes, Ifunanya said. But the system is locked. Hauwa thought of Nana's lessons of patterns of paths people took when they wanted to hide. Where would he keep copies? Hauwa asked softly. Not the system, himself. Ifunanya looked at her. His office. They exchanged a look that carried the weight of risk. That's impossible, Ifunanya said. Security knows him, Hauwa finished. Trusts him. Ifunanya exhaled. And no one trusts you. Hauwa lifted her chin. Then I'm the only one who can go. Ifunanya shook her head. You're pregnant and invisible, Hauwa replied. That's how I get in. They moved toward the administrative wing, timing their steps between staff changes. Hauwa kept her head down, shoulders rounded, playing the role the world had assigned her. No one stopped a pregnant woman pushing a cleaning cart, especially not when she looked exhausted. Kunle's office sat at the end of a carpeted corridor, glass walls reflecting soft light. His name gleamed on the door. The receptionist glanced up. Can I help you? Hauwa gestured to the cart. Spill, she murmured. Bathroom. The receptionist waved her through, already turning back to her screen. Inside the office suite, Hauwa's heart hammered. Ifunanya waited by the door, pretending to check messages while keeping watch. Hauwa moved fast. She knew what to look for. Not files labeled guilt, but ordinary things used often. She scanned the desk, the shelves, the side table. There an envelope tucked beneath a leather planner. She slid it free. Inside were printouts, procurement approvals, batch numbers, delivery timestamps annotated in Kunle's neat handwriting. One line circled in red matched the compound found in Taiwo's blood. Hauwa's breath caught. Footsteps approached. Done, Ifunanya hissed. They slipped out, just as Kunle's voice echoed from the corridor. Where is everyone? He asked sharply. They rounded the corner and blended into a cluster of nurses. Minutes later, they reached the boardroom adjacent to the ICU, where early morning members had begun to gather, faces drawn, phones buzzing. Ifunanya stepped forward, folder raised. I need 5 minutes. Kunle arrived moments later, eyes flashing when he saw the envelope in Hauwa's hands. What is this? He demanded. The truth. Hauwa said, her voice steadier than she felt. You said tonight. You said it had to look clinical. Gasps rippled through the room. Kunle laughed too quickly. This is ridiculous. Who will believe a cleaner Hauwa met his gaze? Believe the papers. Ifunanya laid the documents on the table. These approvals trace directly to your office. The compound matches toxicology. Funk stepped forward, her face pale. Kunle. Kunle's smile faltered. Funk, don't let panic cloud your judgment. Before Funke could respond, alarms blared from the ICU, urgent relentless. A nurse burst in. Mr. Akinyemi's vitals are dropping again. Kunle's head snapped toward the sound. Ifunanya moved. Now she said, "Lock down procurement access. Call security." Kunle backed toward the door. "You're making a mistake." Hauwa felt another contraction grip her, sharp and insistent. She gasped, gripping the table. "Not tonight," she whispered. "You don't get tonight." Security flooded the room. Orders overlapped. Kunle was escorted out, shouting protests that rang hollow against the evidence. In the ICU, doctors worked frantically. Ifunanya returned to Taiwo's bedside, hands steady despite the storm around her. Hauwa watched from the doorway, breathing through pain, through fear, through hope. The plan had been named. Now it had to be stopped. The ICU pulsed with urgency, as if the walls themselves had begun to breathe faster. Monitors chirped in overlapping rhythms. Nurses moved with controlled speed, voices clipped, hands precise. The earlier chaos had returned sharper, now edged with consequence. The evidence had reached the board. Kunle Ogunle had been escorted away. And yet Taiwo Akinyemi's body did not care about justice or timing. It cared only about survival. Hauwa Sadiq stood at the threshold. One hand braced against the wall. The other pressed low against her belly as another contraction rolled through her. It was not strong enough to force her down, but it was strong enough to remind her that she was balancing two lives on a narrowing line. "Sit," Dr. Ifunanya Eze ordered, guiding her to a chair. "You cannot stand through this." Hauwa obeyed reluctantly. "How is he?" Ifunanya glanced at the monitor. "Unstable. The compound is still in his system. We stopped the source, but his body is fighting the aftermath." Hauwa closed her eyes. Nana's words surfaced again, calm and exact. "The first wakes the body. The second teaches it to breathe. The third, if there is a third, is for clearing what lingers." Hauwa opened her eyes. "There's one more step." Ifunanya turned to her sharply. "What?" The herb Hauwa said quietly. "There's a final infusion." Nana said it helps the body release what doesn't belong. Ifunanya hesitated. "You didn't mention a third." "I hoped we wouldn't need it," Hauwa replied. "It's riskier. It strains the body." "If it strains the body," Ifunanya said, "it could kill him." Hauwa swallowed. "Or it could save him." They stood there, the weight of the decision pressing down on them. The head of cardiology approached, eyes tired. "We're reaching the limits of conventional intervention," he said. "If his organs don't stabilize, we'll lose him within hours." Funke Akinyemi stepped forward, her composure finally cracked. "Do it," she said hoarsely. "Whatever it is. Do it!" The doctor looked at Ifunanya. "Your call." Ifunanya met Hauwa's gaze. "Do you have what you need?" Hauwa shook her head. "One ingredient is missing." Silence fell. What ingredient? Funke demanded. "A resin," Hauwa said. "From a specific tree. It neutralizes what the compound binds to." "And where do we find it?" Ifunanya asked. Hauwa's voice dropped. "The markets, the old ones, not the pharmacies." The head of cardiology checked his watch. "We don't have hours." Hauwa pushed herself to her feet, despite the ache. "We don't need hours, we need minutes." Ifunanya studied her face, sweat damp, determined, afraid. Then she nodded. "I'll go with you." "No," Hauwa said immediately. "You can't leave him." "I know where to look. You're in pain," Ifunanya countered. "I've been in pain," Hauwa replied. "This won't be the thing that stops me." Funk stepped closer. "Take my driver," she said. Take whatever you need. Hauwa hesitated, then nodded once. Pride would help no one now. The city was already awake when they pulled onto the road, the sky a pale gray promise of morning. The driver navigated traffic with urgency, weaving through buses and bikes, horn blaring. Hauwa clutched the seat, breathing through a tightening in her abdomen. Each jolt sent a ripple of discomfort through her body. Faster, she urged softly. They reached the market just as vendors were setting up wooden tables, sacks of grains, baskets of leaves. The air buzzed with bargaining and morning calls. Hauwa stepped out the smells, grounding her smoke-spice earth. She moved quickly, ignoring curious glances, heading straight for the far row where the old sellers sat. An elderly woman looked up as Hauwa approached. Her eyes narrowed, then softened. "You walk like someone carrying two burdens," the woman said. Hauwa forced a smile. "I'm looking for resin from the Iroko tree. Fresh, untreated." The woman studied her for a long moment, then nodded toward a crate beneath her table. "For breathing," she said, "and for letting go." "Yes," Hauwa breathed. The woman handed her a small wrapped bundle. "Use it carefully." Hauwa pressed money into her hand without bargaining. "Thank you." As she turned to leave, a sharp pain seized her stronger than before. She cried out, bending forward, clutching her belly. "Hauwa!" the driver shouted, rushing to her side. She breathed hard, vision blurring. "Not now," she pleaded silently. "Please." The pain eased enough for her to straighten, though her legs shook violently. "I'm okay," she insisted. "Take me back." Back at the hospital, the ICU felt tighter, louder. Time had accelerated. Ifunanya met Hauwa at the door, eyes searching. "Did you get it?" Hauwa nodded, handing over the bundle. "Prepare it exactly like this," she said, explaining quickly, words tumbling over each other as another contraction threatened. They worked together in the supply room, hands steady despite the stakes. Ifunanya followed Hauwa's instructions, precisely measuring, diluting, documenting everything. "This goes against everything we're taught," Ifunanya murmured. "It goes with everything we're meant to protect," Hauwa replied. They returned to Taiwo's bedside. His skin was clammy now, the monitor wavering. The room quieted as the doctor nodded permission. Ifunanya administered the infusion, slowly watching every response. Hauwa counted under her breath, grounding herself, her heart pounding in her ears. At first nothing happened. Then Taiwo's breathing shifted, not smoother but deeper. A cough racked his body, sudden and violent. Nurses moved instantly, suctioning, adjusting. The monitor spiked, then steadied. "His oxygen saturation is improving," a nurse called out. Another cough, then a long, shuddering breath that did not belong to any machine. Hauwa covered her mouth, tears streaming freely now. "He's letting it go," she whispered. Minutes passed. The room held its breath. Taiwo's vitals stabilized further, not healed, not safe, but alive in a way that no longer felt borrowed. Ifunanya stepped back, shoulders sagging with relief. "We did it," she said softly. "We bought him real time." Hauwa sagged into the chair, exhaustion crashing over her. Her body trembled, the effort catching up all at once. The pain returned, strong, insistent. This time it did not fade. Ifunanya noticed immediately. "Hauwa," she said gently. "How long has this been happening?" Hauwa tried to answer, but a sharp contraction stole her voice. She cried out, gripping the chair. "Get obstetrics," Ifunanya ordered. "Now." Funk stepped forward, panic etched into her face. "Is she? She's in preterm labor," Ifunanya said. "We need to move her." As they wheeled Hauwa away, she turned her head back toward Taiwo's bed one last time. His chest rose and fell on its own, now fragile but real. "I kept my promise," she whispered. In the obstetrics wing, doctors worked quickly, voices calm, hands sure. Hauwa clung to the edge of consciousness. pain cresting and falling like waves. Between contractions she thought of Nana, of the quiet strength in her eyes, the certainty in her voice. Be brave enough to be mocked, Hauwa laughed weakly through tears. I was, she whispered. Hours later, as the sun finally lifted over Lagos, Taiwo Akinyemi slept alive, breathing no longer declared finished, and in another wing of the same hospital. Hauwa Sadiq fought her own battle, bringing life into a world that had nearly taken it from both of them. Morning arrived without ceremony, pale sunlight slipping through narrow windows as if unsure it was welcome. The hospital felt altered, no longer a place of quiet authority, but a battlefield marked by evidence exhaustion and fragile hope. In the obstetrics wing, Hauwa Sadiq lay propped against pillows, her body trembling with the aftershocks of labor that had not yet completed its work. Medication slowed the contractions, buying time the way her grandmother's remedies once had, carefully at a cost. A nurse adjusted the drip and smiled reassuringly. You're stable, she said. The baby is stable. Rest. Rest felt impossible. Hauwa's thoughts kept drifting back to the ICU, to Taiwo Akinyemi's chest rising on its own, to the sound of a breath that belonged to him and no machine. She closed her eyes and whispered a thank you she did not direct at any one thing. Down the corridor, Dr. Ifunanya Eze stood with a small team of administrators, a thick folder open on the table between them. The documents Hauwa had retrieved from Kunle Ogunle's office lay neatly arranged: procurement approvals, delivery logs, annotations, timestamps. This was no longer suspicion. It was a map. We have enough to proceed, the hospital's legal counsel said quietly. But we need corroboration beyond internal records. Ifunanya nodded. Toxicology confirms the compound. Procurement logs show authorization. Delivery records place it on site. We need to connect intent and opportunity, the council added. Both exist, Ifunanya said. He had access, and he stood to gain. The council hesitated. The board will want to hear it from the patient. He's not awake yet, Ifunanya replied, but he's improving, slowly. Across the hospital, in a private waiting room guarded by security, Kunle Ogunle sat alone, his composure finally fraying. His phone lay face down on the table, silent. He had tried calling contacts, who once answered immediately. Now messages went unread. A security officer entered. You'll remain here until the police arrive. Kunle scoffed weakly. On what grounds? Suspicion of attempted murder, the officer replied evenly. And corporate sabotage. Kunle leaned back, laughing without humor. You're making a mistake. The officer did not respond. Back in the ICU, Taiwo's condition stabilized enough for the medical team to reduce support. The machines still hummed, but they no longer dominated the room. Dr. Ifunanya watched closely, recording every small improvement. Funke Akinyemi stood nearby, her posture, rigid eyes hollowed by sleeplessness. She had spent the night oscillating between hope and guilt. Hope that her brother might return, guilt that she had nearly signed his life away. When Taiwo's fingers twitched faintly, Funke gasped. Did you see that? She asked. Ifunanya nodded. Reflexive movement. It's a good sign. Funke swallowed hard. I trusted Kunle, she said quietly. I trusted him with everything. Ifunanya did not answer. Some lessons demanded silence. By midday, the police arrived discreetly. Statements were taken. Evidence was logged. Kunle was escorted through a back corridor to avoid cameras, his protests fading into the sterile echo of the hall. Word spread anyway. Staff whispered. Executives texted. The board convened an emergency session. In the obstetrics wing, Hauwa dozed fitfully, waking with each unfamiliar sound. A doctor explained the plan: bed rest monitoring, careful patience. Hauwa listened, nodding, her hand resting protectively over her belly. Will he be okay? She asked suddenly. The doctor hesitated. The CEO, yes. He's improving, the doctor said. Thanks to you, Hauwa shook her head. Thanks to many. The doctor smiled gently. Not everyone would risk what you did. Hauwa looked away. I didn't think about risk. Later that afternoon, Dr. Ifunanya visited Hauwa, bringing news. The board has suspended Kunle, pending investigation, she said. Police are pressing charges. Hauwa exhaled a tension she hadn't known she carried, finally loosening. And Taiwo. He's stable enough that we're reducing sedation, Ifunanya replied. He may wake soon. Tears pricked Hauwa's eyes. Will he remember? We don't know, Ifunanya said honestly. But we'll be ready. In the ICU, Funke sat alone with her brother, the room quiet except for the soft rhythm of life returning. She leaned closer, her voice trembling. I almost lost you, she whispered. I was so busy protecting everything else. Taiwo's brow furrowed faintly as if her words brushed against him from far away. Funke pressed her hand to her mouth, tears finally breaking free. Come back, she pleaded. Please. Across the city, news outlets caught wind of the unfolding scandal. Headlines spoke cautiously of internal investigations and medical irregularities. The truth moved slower than rumor, but it moved. By evening, Taiwo's eyes fluttered beneath closed lids. Ifunanya stood at the bedside, heart pounding. She leaned closer, calling his name softly. Taiwo. His eyelids twitched again. Taiwo Akinyemi, she said louder now. Slowly, painfully slowly, his eyes opened. The world swam into view in fragments, white light blurred shapes, a pressure in his chest that felt like memory. He tried to speak. No sound came. Easy, Ifunanya said gently. You're safe. His gaze shifted unfocused, then settled briefly on Funke. Recognition flickered, weak but present. Funke sobbed openly, now gripping the bedrail. You're here, she whispered. You're here! Taiwo's lips parted. A hoarse whisper escaped. What happened? Ifunanya exchanged a look with Funke. There's a lot to explain, she said, but you were poisoned. Taiwo's eyes sharpened, clarity cutting through confusion. He tried to lift his hand. Ifunanya guided it, placing a pen between his fingers and a notepad beneath. His hand shook muscles, protesting the effort. He wrote slowly, painfully. Kunle. Funke's breath hitched. Ifunanya nodded once. Yes, she said. We know. Taiwo closed his eyes, exhaustion crashing back in waves. But the message had landed. The truth was no longer fragile. That night, as security tightened and statements multiplied, Ifunanya stood alone in the corridor staring at the floor. The weight of the last days pressed down on her, but beneath it was something steadier. They had crossed the hardest part. In the obstetrics wing, Hauwa woke from a shallow sleep, heart racing. A nurse rushed in. Your blood pressure spiked, she said gently. But it's coming down. Hauwa breathed slowly, then asked, Did he wake? The nurse smiled. Yes. Hauwa's eyes filled with tears. She let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Thank you, she whispered to the nurse, to Nana, to the stubbornness that had carried her this far. Outside night settled again over Lagos, but this time it did not feel like an ending. It felt like a threshold. By the next morning, the hospital no longer belonged solely to doctors. It belonged to lawyers, board members, police officers, and people who spoke in careful phrases, meant to survive courtrooms and headlines. The corridors outside the ICU filled with suits and tense conversations, while security doubled at every entrance. What had begun as a medical crisis had become something larger, a reckoning that could not be contained within white walls. Taiwo Akinyemi lay awake now, though. Exhaustion still weighed heavily on him. His eyes followed movement slowly, as if the world were returning in layers. Dr. Ifunanya Eze adjusted his chart, careful not to overwhelm him. You've been through a great deal, she said gently. We're keeping explanations short for now. Taiwo swallowed throat dry. Who saved me? Ifunanya hesitated. Someone you once saved. He frowned faintly, confusion clouding his gaze. Before he could ask more, Funke stepped forward. The board is here, she said quietly. They want to see you. Taiwo's brow tightened. Already they're frightened, Funke admitted, and they want control. He exhaled slowly, every breath, still an effort. Let them come. In the adjoining conference room, board members gathered around a polished table, eyes darting to the security officers stationed near the door. Documents lay spread out, procurement records, toxicology reports, hospital logs. The truth was no longer abstract. It sat in ink and signatures, undeniable. Kunle Ogunle's name appeared again and again. We must act decisively, one board member said. Before this destroys the company. Another shook his head. This is the company, or it will be depending on what we do now. When Taiwo was wheeled in, the room fell silent. The sight of him pale but alive shifted the balance instantly. Authority returned to his presence like a shadow finding its owner. He did not speak right away. He looked at each face in turn, reading expressions he had trusted for years. Kunle, he said hoarsely. Where is he? In custody, Funk answered. The police have him. Taiwo closed his eyes briefly. Pain not physical this time flickered across his face. I gave him everything, he murmured. Access, trust, and he used it, Funke said. Taiwo nodded once, accepting the truth without denial. Proceed with the investigation, he said. Full transparency, no shielding. A murmur rippled through the room. And the succession, someone asked carefully. Taiwo lifted his gaze. There will be none. I am here. The matter seemed settled until a legal advisor cleared his throat. There is one complication, he said. Regarding the method of revival, Taiwo's eyes narrowed slightly. Explain. The advisor hesitated. There are concerns about unauthorized intervention. A civilian woman, Taiwo interrupted. Pregnant, poor. The room stilled. Yes, the advisor admitted. Hospital administration is under pressure to explain. Stop, Taiwo said, gathering strength. If she had not intervened, you would be discussing my funeral. Silence. She acted when your systems failed. Taiwo continued. If you punish her, you punish the truth. No one argued. Down the hall in the obstetrics wing, Hauwa Sadiq sat upright for the first time since the night before. The medication had steadied her contractions, though exhaustion clung to her like damp cloth. A nurse helped her drink water, smiling encouragingly. You have visitors, the nurse said softly. Hauwa stiffened. Who? The door opened slowly. Funke Akinyemi stepped inside. Hauwa's first instinct was fear. She straightened, bracing herself for judgment. Funk paused just inside the doorway, studying the small room. The plain bed, the worn bag at Hauwa's feet. The young woman who had shifted the course of her family's life. I owe you an apology, Funk said quietly. Hauwa blinked. I treated you with cruelty, Funke continued. Because it was easier than admitting I was wrong. Hauwa lowered her eyes. I understand. No, Funke said, firmly. You shouldn't have to. She took a step closer. My brother is alive because of you. Hauwa swallowed hard emotion, tightening her throat. He saved me first, she said. Long ago. Funk's expression softened. He wants to see you, when you're able. Hauwa's heart skipped. Me. Yes. Later that afternoon, Hauwa was wheeled carefully into the ICU. The room felt different now, less frantic, more reverent. Taiwo lay propped against pillows, color returning slowly to his face. When he saw her, his eyes widened with recognition that went beyond memory. You, he whispered. Hauwa smiled shyly. You remember. I remember. The road, Taiwo said slowly. A girl with water cans. I never knew you didn't need to, Hauwa replied. You helped. Taiwo's eyes glistened. And you came back for me. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of years pressing gently between them. Thank you, Taiwo said finally. Not as a CEO, as a man who was spared. Hauwa nodded, tears slipping free. I only did what I could. Outside the room, Dr. Ifunanya watched relief loosening the knot she had carried for days. But the day was not done with trials. By evening, hospital administration convened a press briefing. Questions flew about the poisoning, the investigation, the unusual recovery. Lawyers crafted careful answers. Taiwo approved a statement acknowledging the role of an individual whose courage and compassion saved a life. Names were withheld, but whispers spread quickly. In a holding room downstairs, Kunle Ogunlai sat across from investigators. His confidence finally eroded. Evidence piled up each document, tightening the circle around him. When shown Taiwo's written accusation, his shoulders slumped. I didn't mean to kill him, Kunle muttered. I just needed him gone. The words sealed his fate. As night approached, Hauwa rested again, her body demanding peace after days of battle. A nurse adjusted her blankets. You're safe now, she said gently. Hauwa closed her eyes, breathing deeply. For the first time since coming to Lagos, she felt something like it. In the ICU, Taiwo drifted into sleep, his breathing steady, unassisted. The danger had not vanished, but it had retreated. Justice was no longer fragile, and tomorrow the final truths would be spoken aloud. Morning brought no relief, only clarity. The sunlight that filtered into the hospital boardroom was sharp and unforgiving, illuminating every crease in every suit, every shadow beneath sleepless eyes. By now the truth had weight. It pressed against the walls, against the people who had tried to manage it, soften it, delay it. There would be no more delay. Taiwo Akinyemi entered the room, slowly supported by a nurse. His steps measured, but determined. The sight of him, upright alive, sent a visible ripple through the gathered board members, lawyers, and senior administrators. This was not the image they had prepared for. This was not the ending they had anticipated. Taiwo took his seat at the head of the table. Let's finish this, he said quietly. The lead investigator stood and began to summarize the findings, the toxicology results, the procurement trail, the forged approvals, the recorded calls. Each detail landed like a verdict read aloud. No dramatics, no raised voices. The facts did not require them. Kunle Ogunlai was brought in under escort. He looked smaller now. The confidence that once framed his posture had drained away, replaced by a brittle defiance that could not hide fear. When his eyes met Taiwo's, something flickered, regret perhaps, or anger at being seen so clearly. You authorized the compound, the investigator said. You ensured repeated exposure. You accelerated the process when recovery became possible. Kunle shook his head weakly. I was protecting the company. Taiwo leaned forward, his gaze steady. You were protecting yourself. Silence followed, heavy, absolute. The investigator continued. There is no evidence of coercion. This was premeditated. Kunle's shoulders sagged. I didn't think it would go this far. Taiwo's voice cut through the room, calm and devastating. You planned my death. How far did you think it would go? There was nothing left to say. Kunle was escorted out again, this time without protest. The door closed behind him with a finality that did not echo. It did not need to. Taiwo turned to the board. Effective immediately, I am resuming my duties, he said. There will be an independent audit of every department Kunle touched. No exceptions. A murmur of assent followed, quick, eager. People were already recalibrating their loyalties. Second, Taiwo continued. This company will fund an internal review of hospital procurement across all our partner facilities. What happened to me? will not happen again." He paused, then added, "And finally, any action taken against the woman who intervened to save my life will be reversed, with apologies." No one objected. Across the hospital in the obstetrics wing, Hauwa Sadiq slept lightly, her dreams broken by the distant rhythm of carts and footsteps. She woke when a nurse touched her shoulder gently. "Someone is here to see you." Hauwa's first instinct was anxiety. Then the door opened, and Taiwo Akinyemi stepped inside. He moved slowly, but he moved on his own. Hauwa pushed herself upright, startled. "Sir, please," Taiwo said softly. "Not that." He took a chair beside her bed, studying her with an expression that held gratitude and something deeper recognition of a debt that could not be repaid with money. "I never thanked you properly," he said. "I never even knew your name." "Hauwa," she replied. "Hauwa Sadiq." He nodded. "Hauwa." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what had passed between them, settling gently rather than painfully. "I remember the road," Taiwo said. "I remember kneeling in the dust. I didn't stay because I'm a hero. I stayed because leaving would have been wrong." Hauwa smiled faintly. "That's why I came back." Taiwo glanced at her belly, his expression softening. "How are you?" "I'm stable," Hauwa said. "The baby is strong." "Good," Taiwo replied. "Very good." He took a breath. "What you did, what you risked, will follow you. People will talk." Hauwa nodded. "They always do." "I want to be clear," Taiwo said. "I will not turn your courage into a story that consumes you. No press, no spectacle. You deserve dignity, not noise." Hauwa felt tears sting her eyes. "Thank you. There is one thing I will do," Taiwo added. "If you accept." She looked at him cautious. "What is it?" "I will ensure you are protected," he said. "Medically, legally, and when your child is born you will not stand alone." Hauwa considered this carefully. "I don't want charity." Taiwo nodded. "Then don't take charity. Take fairness." He stood slowly. "Rest. We will speak again." After he left, Hauwa lay back, breathing deeply. For the first time, the future did not feel like a threat. That afternoon, the hospital released a formal statement. It confirmed an attempted poisoning and internal conspiracy, and the survival of the CEO, due to extraordinary circumstances and timely intervention. Kunle Ogunle's name was included. Charges were filed. The machinery of justice began to turn slow, but relentless. In the city, reactions were swift and divided. Some praised the hospital's transparency. Others questioned how close they had come to burying a man who could still breathe. Among the noise, one quiet truth held firm: power had been challenged and had failed. As evening settled, Taiwo returned to the ICU, briefly standing alone by the window. His reflection stared back at him, older, now marked by vulnerability. He thought of the girl by the roadside years ago, of the woman in the hospital corridor who refused to be invisible, of how close he had come to becoming a name spoken in past tense. Across the hall, Hauwa slept again, her hand resting protectively over her belly. The storm had passed, but its rain had changed the ground. Tomorrow would bring consequences, courtrooms, restructuring, long conversations about trust and betrayal. But tonight, there was something simpler. Breath, life, and the quiet knowledge that goodness, when it refuses to retreat, can still reach across every barrier built to stop it. Justice did not arrive with applause. It arrived in paperwork, court dates, and long mornings where nothing felt dramatic, only necessary. In the weeks that followed, Lagos watched a quiet unspooling of power, as facts replaced rumor and evidence replaced influence. Kunle Ogunle was formally charged. The court documents were precise and merciless, outlining authorization trails, falsified urgency memos, and recorded conversations that erased any remaining doubt about intent. The man who once moved through boardrooms with easy authority now stood under fluorescent lights, stripped of protection by the very systems he had learned to manipulate. The trial did not move quickly. Justice rarely did, but it moved steadily, and that steadiness mattered. Taiwo Akinyemi recovered slowly, deliberately. Physical therapy taught his muscles to remember their purpose. Counseling taught his mind to accept how close he had come to erasure. He returned to the office, in stages, first from home, then in short visits, then fully, never pretending that nothing had happened. At the first full board meeting after his return, he did not open with numbers. "I nearly died because we forgot what accountability means," he said, voice even. "From now on, we will remember." He instituted independent audits, rotated procurement oversight, and dismantled quiet hierarchies that had allowed loyalty to replace scrutiny. Some executives resigned, others adapted. The company steadied, not because it was spared embarrassment, but because it faced it. Funke Akinyemi changed too. She attended every hearing. She answered questions without deflection. She apologized publicly, not for the sake of headlines, but because apology, she learned, was the first form of repair. She began funding compliance training across partner hospitals, insisting that medical authority must never be rushed by corporate pressure again. For Hauwa, Sadiq, justice felt less like a headline and more like a slow exhale. She remained in the hospital until her body settled fully, the threat of preterm labor receding with careful monitoring and rest. When she was discharged, she did not leave through a back door. No press waited, no cameras followed. Taiwo had kept his word. A social worker met with her to ensure housing security. A legal advisor explained her rights and protections. A doctor scheduled follow-ups without condescension or urgency that felt like fear. For the first time since arriving in Lagos, Hauwa felt seen without being studied. She moved into a small apartment not far from the hospital. Quiet, clean, modest. It was not a gift wrapped in spectacle. It was a solution grounded in dignity. The rent was subsidized through a maternal health fund that Funke helped establish, one that did not carry Hauwa's name, but would serve women like her for years. "I don't want special treatment," Hauwa said once to Dr. Ifunanya Eze, who visited her with oranges and a tired smile. "You're not getting it," Ifunanya replied. "You're getting what should have been available all along." They sat together, listening to the city breathe. Hauwa's pregnancy progressed under careful watch. Some days were heavy with fear of the unknown, fear of repeating old patterns. Other days carried quiet joy, the flutter of movement, the certainty of growth, the simple pleasure of cooking in a kitchen that belonged to her. Taiwo visited once more before the birth, not as a benefactor, but as a man paying respect. "I want you to hear this clearly," he said, seated across from her at a small table. "Your future is yours. I will not decide it for you." Hauwa nodded. "I want to work," she said. "Not because of what happened, because I can." He smiled. "When you're ready." When the day came, it came without ceremony. Labor was long and difficult, but it did not frighten Hauwa the way fear once had. She breathed through pain with a steadiness she had learned in darker hours. Dr. Ifunanya was on call, present but unobtrusive, trusting Hauwa's strength. At dawn, a cry filled the room, clear, insistent, alive. A daughter. Hauwa wept openly, holding the small warm weight against her chest. She whispered Nana's name, then whispered another one she chose not for meaning or memory but for hope. Outside the hospital, the city moved on. Inside, something new had arrived. In court, Kunle Ogunlai was convicted. The sentence did not satisfy everyone. No sentence ever did, but it acknowledged truth, and acknowledgement mattered. It named the harm, documented the intent, and placed responsibility where it belonged. Taiwo attended the sentencing, quietly leaving before reporters could gather. He returned to work the next day without comment. Months passed. Hauwa returned to work too. Not as a cleaner, not as a symbol, but as a trainee in hospital administration support. She studied in the evenings, her daughter sleeping nearby. The work was difficult and unfamiliar, but it was honest. When she faltered, She remembered Nana's voice. Learn what the earth gives and don't waste it. She volunteered with the Maternal Health Fund on weekends, helping women navigate clinics and paperwork. She did not tell her story, unless asked, and even then she told it simply. I didn't do anything special, she would say. I just didn't walk away. Taiwo watched her progress from a distance, careful not to intrude. When she completed her training, he sent a brief note. No letterhead, no flourish. Well done. Keep going. One afternoon, months later, Hauwa stood outside the hospital where everything had begun. She watched people pass doctors, rushing families, waiting cleaners, working quietly. She did not feel anger toward the place anymore. She felt resolve. Inside, Dr. Ifunanya passed her in the corridor and smiled. You look different, she said. I feel different, Hauwa replied. They walked together for a moment. Two women bound not by circumstance anymore, but by choice. Justice had not fixed everything. It rarely did. But it had created space for breath, for learning, for beginnings that did not require permission. And in that space, healing took root. Not loudly, not perfectly, but enough.
In life, we are often taught to measure worth by titles, wealth, or power. We are told that those at the bottom should stay quiet, wait their turn, and accept what the world gives them. But this story reminds us of a deeper truth. Dignity does not come from position, and courage does not wait for permission. Hauwa Sadiq had no authority, no education that the system respected, no safety net to protect her. She was poor, pregnant, and easily dismissed. Yet, when faced with a moment that demanded action, she chose responsibility over fear. She did not act because she expected reward. She acted because walking away would have meant abandoning her own humanity. Taiwo Akinyemi, on the other hand, learned that power without accountability is fragile. Wealth can build walls, but it can also blind us to the quiet dangers growing inside those walls. His survival was not only a medical miracle, but a moral one, and a reminder that leadership must be rooted in humility and that trust should never replace oversight. Justice in this story did not arrive dramatically. It arrived slowly through truth, patience, and the willingness to face uncomfortable facts. That is often how real justice works. It is not loud, but it is lasting. And healing, too, was not instant. It came in small steps, a steady heartbeat, a protected child, a woman finally allowed to build a future with dignity. The most powerful lesson here is simple, but demanding kindness is not weakness. When someone chooses to do the right thing, despite risk, mockery, or loss, that choice can shift entire lives. Even systems built to ignore the vulnerable can be forced to listen when truth refuses to be silent. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect on it. What part stayed with you the longest? Was it Hauwa's courage, Taiwo's awakening, or the reminder that goodness still matters in a hard world? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters here, and if you believe in stories that speak about humanity, justice, and hope, subscribe to the channel. These stories continue because people like you choose to listen, reflect, and share.